Well, welcome in everybody. The latest college football playoff rankings came out about an hour ago, and we're excited to talk about them. Tennessee moved up one spot from number 8 to number 7 in the rankings, and if we look at the rest of them, we've got Oregon, they stayed at number 1, Texas number 2, Penn State moved up to number 3, Notre Dame at 4, Georgia is up 2 spots, Ohio State down a few at number 6 after that loss to Michigan. Obviously Tennessee at 7, SMU at 8, Indiana at 9, Boise State at 10, Alabama back in the 12-team running at 11, and Miami, after they lost to Syracuse, they sit at that final spot in number 12.
Yeah, obviously the rankings are important, but more important, what people really care about is the bracket. So if we could take a look at that,
yes.
That really, there we go, that kind of decides exactly what the college football playoff will look like. So I know there's a lot of speculation this week. I know Vol fans really wanted it, but as of right now, Tennessee will not have a home game. Instead, they will have to travel to the Shoe and play at Ohio State. Of course, it could change after conference championships, but right now, this is kind of what we're looking at. So the first 4 that get the bye would obviously be conference champions, and then after that, there's everyone else. So even though Tennessee is ranked 7 technically in the bracket, they're number 9.
Yes, they're the 9 seed in the bracket, so automatically would, if they were to play in the first round of the playoffs tomorrow, they would play in Ohio State and Columbus. So definitely interesting, not something that Vol fans wanted to necessarily see. And a big question is obviously, why is Ohio State above Tennessee in this ranking?
Yeah, and I think what we've seen on Twitter and just what fans have said, and even reporters have said too, I think the College Football Playoff Committee maybe has a little bit of inconsistency when it comes to rankings. I'll just rattle off a couple of examples here. So Georgia, they dropped 9 spots after losing on the road to a ranked Ole Miss team, but Ohio State dropped 4 spots at home to an unranked Michigan. So that's kind of one. Another example is Miami dropping for losing to an 8-3 Syracuse team on the road. But then again, you talk about Ohio State. They lose at home to a 6-5 team and only scored 10 points, and they only dropped 4 spots. So that's another example. I saw one with the Vols in it. They fell, which I didn't even realize this. It's funny because we've been talking about these rankings, and like it's so much that you're like, I don't even remember the rankings 3 weeks ago. But Tennessee apparently fell 4 spots after beating Florida at home in overtime.
Yes.
So I think if you're a Tennessee fan, that's where you're kind of a little bit upset. Why was Ohio State ranked higher?
Yeah.
To me, on paper, when you look at Ohio State's schedule, when you look at Tennessee's schedule as far as conference wins, conference losses, to me they're pretty parallel. Obviously, Tennessee lost on the road at Arkansas, an unranked team that has kind of sits at the bottom of the SEC, and then they lose at Georgia, a team that has pretty been consistent this week or this season, obviously is at the top of the rankings. And then you look at Ohio State, kind of similar. They lose at number 1 Oregon by 1 point, 32-31.
Yeah.
But then they go to Penn State, get a big statement win, 20-13. They just win by 1 touchdown, but still against number 4. But then, of course, the loss that everyone's talking about this week is versus Michigan. They lose, only put up 10 points at home, and then another ranked Big Ten win that they do get at home would be over Indiana, pretty big, 38-15.
Yeah, and what we were just saying is obviously Ohio State has been ranked in the top 5 for a lot of this season, so I think it makes it a little bit harder to drop them down as we get closer to Selection Sunday. That might have something to do with it. We mentioned Miami. I guess 2 weeks ago, Tennessee was the first team out. Miami now that first team out, if you look at the bracket. And a lot of people are saying, why isn't Alabama the first team out? Why isn't Miami in the 12-team, rankings or whatever? And we got some clarification from Ward Manuel, the CFB chairman, and he pretty much said since Alabama has the edge because they are 3-1 against current top 25 opponents, and Miami is 0-1 against top 25 opponents. So again, some inconsistency there. If you look at wins and losses, I mean, Miami has 2 losses, Alabama has 3. So I guess it really depends on when those losses came as well, because if you look at Miami's schedule, they only have, I think, their last 2 losses came from their last 3 games. So Alabama, I guess, lost a little bit earlier in the middle of the season, and it's, I guess, not as prominent now. I don't really know how their minds work, but that's kind of what I was getting from Ward in that situation.
Yeah, and another thing that he said, apparently on the teleconference, we couldn't listen to it because we're obviously right here, but, again, Ohio State dropping 4 spots at home. Michigan, they put up 10 points. That's going to be like the topic of discussion. Manuel said, when it comes to rivalry games, they maybe look at it a little differently. Quote, we recognize when there is a rivalry game and highly packed with emotion. So I think basically what he's trying to say is when maybe that's kind of what put Ohio State above Tennessee, because it was a rivalry game and clearly there was an after game scuffle. So I think maybe that could have had something to do with it.
Also, I looked, and obviously there's 13 voters on the committee, and I'm pretty sure all 13 of them put Ohio State above Tennessee. So it wasn't just Ward, Manuel. I mean, it was the entire committee. And again, I think it just has to do with like recency of game and like rivalry of game and stuff like that. So definitely interesting. Another thing that he said, and another thing that's kind of been brought up, is whether or not these conference championship games are going to have a play or a role in whether these rankings and the bracket changes at all. And he did say that, you know, depending on whoever's voting in the committee, everybody has a different opinion. It's very subjective, but sometimes they take these things into consideration and sometimes they don't. He said, for example, TSU lost in conference championship game 2 years ago, but they remained at that number 3 spot. So just interesting to see. I mean, it definitely is going to sway things, I'd imagine, in some way, but I guess they look at it all differently, and it is obviously up to opinion when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think though Tennessee fans kind of need to maybe get things put in perspective for a second, kind of what you said. A couple weeks ago, we were having a conversation of, oh, let's hope and pray that Tennessee is in. Okay, well, now we're in. So if you're a Tennessee fan, be happy.
Yes.
Take a deep breath.
Absolutely.
A game in Neyland Stadium is not off the table per se. You need to cross your fingers and toes, and you really need to hope that Texas beats Georgia. That would help, and you really need to be the biggest Oregon fan this weekend and hope that they kill Penn State.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. I mean, this Oregon-Penn State game is going to be huge for Tennessee if they want to play inside Neyland Stadium in the first round. Also goes back to subjectivity and whether or not the committee thinks that, you know, if Penn State loses by 3 points, if they should remain at that number 3 or 4 top 5 spot, or if they get annihilated by Ohio State, you know, should they get dropped down? And I think that's probably going to have to do a lot with every conference championship game, depending on the score of the game and, you know, how competitive it is. And, you know, if Oregon takes down Penn State by, you know, 20 plus points, I don't think Penn State will likely stay at that number 3 spot for sure.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, again, I talked about this on our 6 o'clock newscast. I know Tennessee fans are going to be upset that they don't have a home playoff game as of right now.
Yeah.
But let's put things into perspective. Like, if you're a Tennessee fan, you always say, like, it feels like 98. You want it to feel like a national championship team.
Yep.
And Tennessee is in the playoff run. I mean, Josh
First ever 12-team playoff.
Josh Heupel has 10 regular season wins for the first time since 2001 and 2003. Like, when you talk about Tennessee being back, you're living in it.
Yeah.
So let's take a deep breath.
They really do jump to things. I mean, literally 2 weeks ago, I don't think a first round playoff game at Neyland Stadium was ever in a conversation at all. So I think slowing things down, and again, anything can really happen. I mean, we can all talk about, well, this needs to happen and this needs to happen, but, you know, you never fully know what the committee is going to do and how subjective they're going to be towards one team over another. You know, they could be, you know, a little bit more biased towards the Big Ten, a little bit more biased towards the SEC. Obviously, everybody says the SEC is the best conference in the entire nation. You know, maybe they're trying to give a little bit more love to the Big Ten, you know. So I just think it genuinely is such an up in the air type of thing that Vol fans should definitely not get too worked up if they don't get a first round playoff game at home.
Totally. And, you know, if it does end up being Ohio State, we're sitting there, we're like, okay, like, when is the last time they played? So let's go through a little bit of fun fact. Last time, 1996. I'm going to age myself. That was the year I was born. So 28 years ago. If you know who the running back was for Ohio State, former Tennessee Titan, Heisman winner Eddie George, and of course, Peyton Manning on the Vols. Tennessee did win 20-14, and they've only ever played one time. So at the end of the day, whether they're at home, whether they're on the road, if you're a college football fan, this is what you dream about. You should be excited to have the chance to play an Ohio State team, whether it's at home, whether it's on the road, at the shoe, in a great environment.
Yeah.
This is what dreams are made of.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, it's definitely not even certain that Tennessee's going to be playing Ohio State. Very good chance that they can take on the Nittany Lions in, you know, my home state of Pennsylvania. That would be fun. Regardless, people are like, oh, it's going to be so cold if you go to Ohio State or you go to...
Well, it was snowing here in Knoxville today.
Snowing in Knoxville. So everybody, it's going to be cold regardless, and Nico Iamaleava showed that he can play in the cold against Vanderbilt a week ago. So it was probably the coldest game he's ever, you know, been behind center in. So he showed that he can have that even though he's from California.
And I know, again, we talked earlier this week about if Tennessee has a home playoff game, what tickets would kind of look like. Tennessee has already rolled out their plan. The ticket window for students is open right now. They've already opened up season tickets for season ticket holders and donors. So if you haven't already, go ahead and get that in. They also made a note if they do go on the road, which again, that could be possible. As far as student tickets are concerned, it sounds like they're going to be very, very limited. I think you're going to have to be super lucky and have the, you know, 1 million T-credit scores. I don't even know how they rank it, but you need to have the highest one possible. And then Tennessee did make a point in that email to season ticket holders and to donors that in a normal SEC road game, they get 5,000 tickets for the institution. For the college football playoffs, they'll only get 3,500. So you're talking just like 1,000 tickets over half, which is kind of crazy. So Tennessee, again, making a point that if you're not a season ticket holder and you're not a big time donor, you are probably going to have to scalp tickets. They've said that they're probably only going to have 1,000 tickets to really open up, and they're anticipating about 500 in the upper bowl and 500 in the lower bowl.
Well, good thing orange is a bright color.
So if they do go to Ohio State, I think there's going to be a lot of Buckeyes there, and maybe not a lot of Tennessee fans.
Yeah, but I'm excited. I mean, we have one more ranking that comes out, and that's Selection Sunday on December 8th at noon. So that's going to be
Sunday.
Exciting. Literally Sunday. Doesn't even make sense.
So crazy.
But yeah, we're going to have to see how those conference championship games play out. And then Tennessee's fate is pretty much, it's been up in the hands for a while. So, you know, we'll see where they land.
Yeah, just be happy they're in it.
Yes, absolutely. Secured in it. I mean, what did they say? 97% chance that they're in it. I mean,
they're in. They're in, and that's
you
all
guys
that
are
matters.
good. That's fine.
Awesome. Well, we'll have more for you guys on Sunday as they find out their official fate. Remember, there is still one more ranking, so take a deep breath. This is not finalized. Go cheer for Oregon this weekend, and we'll see what happens on Sunday.
See ya.